Allegations of voter fraud fly in Michigan. We'll take a look at what was said. I'll tell you what it means. It's time for Hold the Line.
Anytime as a challenger, I tried to look at the ballot and then try to verify it, I would get 2 or 3 of the poll workers literally screaming at me to get back 6 feet.
229 of these 30,000 we went through are deceased. We have proof of this.
Ballots were being duplicated en masse by 3 Democrat poll workers at a time.
The gentleman began screaming at me, began yelling at me, began telling me that I had no right to talk to her, and he told her to push the ballot through.
Welcome to Hold the Line. I'm Buck Sexton. That was just a small sampling of the allegations of voter fraud made during a hearing of the Michigan State Senate Oversight Committee. Dead people voting, ballot harvesting, duplicate ballots, stuff that's against the rules. It went on and on and on. Friends, these are not anonymous sources laundered through left-wing cable news reporters. These are named individuals who are under oath. They're coming forward to claim that they saw irregularities and potentially fraud. Now, this is fascinating because for weeks we've been told there is no fraud. And now we have people who are coming forward with very specific details about fraud that they witnessed. And I think you're seeing a bit of a shift now in the media narrative. They'll say, well, there wasn't enough fraud, or they'll just outright lie about it, which is what they've done now with Attorney General Bill Barr. Here's what the Attorney General said. The DOJ hasn't seen enough fraud to date to overturn the election result. That's not the same thing as saying there was no fraud, which is what Chuck Schumer, that senator, that's what he's been telling people, a flat-out lie. Let's go to what was said here and approach some of this with a very basic perspective of, are all these people lying? Are all of them making this up? Are all of them delusional? They're all mistaken, maybe operating in good faith but mistaken? What is the answer here? Or did they witness, at a minimum, irregularities and fraud that require further investigation and due diligence at this time to make sure that only and every legal ballot is counted? Here, for example, in Michigan is a poll watcher, you can hear it right from her, telling a story that we've heard in many states from people, similar circumstances, about how poll observers weren't really allowed to observe. Play it.
I am an unaffiliated Michigan voter who was trained by the GOP to be a poll challenger on Wednesday, November 4th, beginning in the late morning until around 8 p.m. because I was told that they needed help. They were understaffed. I witnessed the room erupt in thunderous applause and derogatory cheering as Republican poll workers were picked off one by one and ejected from the room repeatedly by police escort throughout the day. By the end of the day, they had picked off so many GOP poll workers that there were probably only a few dozen left to monitor all of the processing stations in the room, which I'm told was between 130 and 160.
Apologies, I got him confused with a woman who also testified to the same effect, that there were poll watchers being pushed out of the room. Hours of testimony, so lots of people coming forward with this. And it wasn't only in Michigan, there was also the hearings earlier this week in Arizona, and there are all of these issues that keep coming up. Are the signatures made to match before these ballots are counted or not? Well, that's an important question, isn't it? Something we should all get answers to. Here's what was being said by a witness at the Arizona hearing on this. Play it.
I kept looking at the screen because it seemed very odd. And in the bottom right-hand corner was a yellow banner. And I got into a position where I could see the yellow banner, which said low confidence. Then I started paying much closer attention to the signatures, thinking this didn't even make sense to me because the signature on the ballot that was being compared to other signatures didn't even resemble in any way what they were comparing it to. They were completely illegible. They were just scribbles.
Scribbles. They're supposed to match signatures. Someone's just scribbling on something, that's a problem. There's a reason we have these rules in place. There's a reason there are laws to try to protect election integrity, and one of those laws, depending on the state, is to match signatures. She's saying that they weren't matching the signatures. Oh, and then they said it's some program they're working with. What? Yeah, again, suspicious. Not smoking gun, not ironclad proof, but it is evidence and it is deserving of further scrutiny. You also had, I mentioned this, there are other people saying the same thing in Michigan, that ballot watchers weren't able to actually watch the ballots being counted. Here's a Michigan poll challenger talking about exactly that.
I was under the impression that as a poll challenger, our primary responsibility is to make sure before a vote is cast that that ballot is either in the registered poll book, the computer book, or in the paper poll book, of which anytime as a challenger I tried to look at the ballot and then try to verify it, I would get 2 or 3 of the poll workers literally screaming at me to get back 6 feet. However, we did not know that that had been overturned the night before, which would have been helpful. But at no time were we able actually to physically see the ballot and then see it in the poll electronic book. The person opening the ballot would probably be sitting where Senator Theis is, and the electronic screen that we were supposed to be watching is basically to where the committee clerk is. Now, I don't know if you guys got binocular vision, but I don't.
I don't either. I don't think anyone at home does. I don't think anybody can be expected to be able to see ballots from far away. So what was the point of all of that? There are rules about watching these ballots counted, because once they come out of the security envelopes and once they're in the general pile, it's pretty much impossible to get them discounted, which may be what the fraud was hoping for all along. How can we trust the process moving forward if we don't fully investigate these allegations? And then there's a stunning, and this was one I hadn't seen earlier and elsewhere, allegation from one of the witnesses at the Michigan hearing about military ballots. This was a doozy. Play it.
Not one of the military ballots was a registered voter, and the ballots looked like they were all exactly the same Xerox copies of the ballot. They were all for Biden across the board. There wasn't a single Trump vote, and none of the voters were registered. They had to manually enter the names and addresses and a birth date of 1/1/2020, which would override the system and allow them to enter non-registered voters, of which I saw several that day. Throughout the day, that's how they would override voters that were neither in the electronic poll book or the supplemental updated poll book.
Thank you.
Does she seem untrustworthy to you? Is she a Republican operative who's been paid to lie? Of course not. Just a person who's telling people, coming forward at risk, by the way. Anybody that stands in the way of the Democrat Biden machine at this stage, as you know, is liable to be attacked, threatened. But she's coming forward because she thinks it's the right thing to do, just like all these witnesses. Now, if there are reasonable explanations for what happened here, if these were just occasional irregularities, if it requires just a little bit more information for us to finally accept that what people thought they saw here might have seemed suspicious but wasn't, we need to know that. We need explanations, we need facts, we need the data. The media pretending that this is not happening isn't good enough. We all know what they want. We all know that they prefer a Biden victory here over anything else that they're talking about. The sanctity of our democracy, the need to protect the system. None of that stuff really matters to them. One more here. Arizona, ballot counting. You'd think they would know some things like how many outstanding ballots there were, but according to this witness, no, they didn't. Play it.
The Wednesday before the Friday that we quit voting, so 10 days before they quit tabulating, they thought they were done. And then more truckloads of ballots would come in, and I'm like, how can you not know how many ballots are still out there?
Yes, more questions. If we had a media that believed in informing the people so that they could have trust in institutions like our election, then maybe we would get these answers. But there's only a small portion of the media that cares to chase all this down. And we're doing the very best we can. But let's remember this. It's not over. And as it continues on here, we have to continue to push, because there are certainly people in this process who have been lying to you, will continue to lie to you, and hope that we just forget all about what we've learned. Don't plan on that happening here anytime soon. These days, being prepared for the unknown is more important than ever. I'm sure you've noticed that the world we live in today is anything but predictable. We can all benefit from something reliable right about now. What could be more reliable than real gold and silver? I'm talking about real gold and silver you can hold right in your hands. Call the Oxford Gold Group now. Learn how easy it is to get real gold and silver sent securely directly to your home, or how you can have real gold and silver placed in your IRA or 401k. Just call the Oxford Gold Group at 833-600-GOLD and ask for your free guide on owning gold and silver. Again, call the Oxford Gold Group right now at 833-600-GOLD. The Oxford Gold Group is the only gold company I trust. Give them a call at 833-600-GOLD. Take action today. Don't wait for inflation to kick up. Don't wait for the value of the dollars in your bank account to go down by a lot. You've got to take action now so you prepare for that uncertain future. I'm an Oxford Gold client. I've got gold bars and gold coins at home, courtesy of the Oxford Gold Group. That's right. I called them and bought them myself. You should do the same. Call 833-600-GOLD. Welcome back. Are the dark days, months really, of this pandemic going to be coming to an end soon? Overnight, the UK granted emergency approval for Pfizer's coronavirus vaccine, preparing to roll it out next week, becoming the first country in the world to do so. This as a CDC panel voted 13-1 to give healthcare workers and long-term care facility residents the first vaccine doses once cleared for public use. Here to break down what this means for the rest of us is Dr. David Samadi, author of The Ultimate Manual. Doc, thanks again. Good to see you.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
So first, I want to ask you this, because we'll get into the rollout of the vaccine and what's expected here in this country, but it broke in the news that the UK approved this vaccine before the US did. Why do we have to wait for the FDA to meet next week or whatever it is? Why can't they meet today? Why would the UK be able to approve this vaccine before we do?
Well, it doesn't make any sense. And to be honest with you, I think the president have really pushed FDA to approve these vaccines after the clinical trials. A lot of times these vaccines will take months and years for it to come. So the fact that he was able to cut through all these red ribbons and be able to bring the companies together, perform these clinical trials at a reasonable pace and get the vaccine out. But as far as, why UK is going ahead of us by a week or 10 days, that doesn't make much of a sense. And to be honest with you, in a big picture, it doesn't really matter, even though this is American technology and we produced it, but they are getting it. So it's a great question that doesn't make much of a sense. But the bottom line is, I just found that even from our own hospitals, that these vaccines will be available in about 2 weeks. We're going to give it to the doctors and nurses, high-risk patients, nursing home patients. So I think that the first quarter of 2021, we're going to see millions of these vaccines that are being rolled out there. And of course, it's a personal choice. I don't think this is going to be mandatory. And once we get 60-70% immunity in the country, I think we're going to have good control of this virus and be able to open up our economy, hopefully get rid of these masks and go back to the way we knew our life before this drama.
Dr. Fauci, whom we've all come to know, in my opinion, far too well, this is what he had to say, Dr. Samadi, about the vaccine rollout. Play it.
Towards the middle and end of December, we will be having available about 40 million doses of vaccines for 20 million people that will be allocated to the states according to population. And then locally, you'll have the option with recommendations from the CDC and the ACIP, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, to make the distribution according to the high priority groups. As we get into January, February, and March, and we get more and more of the priority groups, we will soon, as we get into April, have vaccines for the general population.
Doc, is this being rolled out with the prioritization? I know the CDC has this internal vaccination guidance council that's met, and they've produced this. Is this the right way? Should it go in the order that they're talking about here? Healthcare providers and senior citizen homes. Is this how you think it should be done?
Yeah, I think that since this is going to be not enough for the whole entire country, and don't forget, there's also a certain percentage of the country who just won't get the vaccine. They never get the flu vaccine, and so it's their personal choice. But I think it's important for people to know that this vaccine has gone through clinical trials. Multiple companies have spent billions of dollars. This has nothing to do with Trump vaccine. He didn't develop this in the White House. So it would not pass through the scientists and the research if it wasn't safe. Having said that, I think it's also a personal choice. Now, because nursing home was almost 47% of death came from there, doctors, nurses are exposed to this kind of patients. We see the number of COVID now in the hospitals are rising. It's best to cover these high priority groups first and then roll it out to like the general public. Also, another news came out that almost 50 million Americans may have already antibodies that they may not be aware of. And that's huge, because if you already have about 50 million, and if you can cover another 100 million, that's almost 50% of the country. And we're getting closer and closer to what we call the capture of this virus and be able to open up our country the way we know it. So we're getting there. And I'm glad that Dr. Fauci is softening up his timetables. He was talking about not having this until June and July of next year. And, you know, it won't even be normal after the vaccine. And now we see that things are getting softened up a little bit. And all of our predictions, if you look at our interviews a few months ago, I maybe was lucky, but I studied this tremendously. We were lucky enough to say that vaccine will make it by the end of the year. And by the quarter of next year, we're going to have millions out there. And I'm hoping that by May or June, you and I don't have to wear the mask and we can have normal life again, the way we know it.
Dr. Samadi, if this proceeds as planned right now, with the distribution to high-risk groups, healthcare providers first, do you have some sense of when we'll see this reflected, this level of protection that the vaccine will be giving to certain populations first, the at-risk and the healthcare providers? When will we be able to see that in the data? Because it feels like that will be, sure, maybe we don't have everybody who wants it good to go until June or July, but if we start distributing this vaccine by the end of this month, which is what it sounds like is going to be happening, if that's occurring, will we see a drop-off in cases, in your estimation, a drop-off in hospitalizations by February, by March?
Yes.
When will the data reflect it?
Yeah, I think like March is a very good month that you're talking about. And the reason is because I think, number one, if you start in December, you have about 3 weeks shot between these two vaccinations. And it will take about another month for antibodies to be developed in a person. So if you have about like 20 million people are being vaccinated, if all goes well by the plan in December, another 40 million would be vaccinated around like January and February. So by end of March, we should see almost a third of the country have immunity against this virus. And that is really significant. And I think by that time, GlaxoSmith is coming up with some news. Johnson & Johnson is coming with some news. You have Moderna already. You have the Pfizer. Between these four vaccine companies, you're going to be able to have at least another 80 to 100 million vaccines available. And that's enough for general public. And if the immunity is going to be built up within a month, that's why I base May and June as hoping to become to some normalcy based on those numbers. And I think we will get there. I've always been very optimistic in this pandemic from the first day that we got the news till now. And I'm glad that we've been on the right track of this virus.
All right, Dr. Samadi, we appreciate you joining us.
We've had a tough time just like everybody else. With the shutdown, we will continue to open. We will do everything in a safe manner, but we have no confidence in the leadership of the city and state, and we will continue to open if there is another shutdown.
That was Denny Presti, co-owner of the bar Max Public House in Staten Island. Danny was arrested Tuesday night for declaring his bar an autonomous zone and defying Governor Cuomo's strict coronavirus lockdowns for some zones of the city, not for others. But this New Yorker isn't the only one fighting for his freedom. After being hauled off in handcuffs, hundreds of patriots gathered outside Danny's bar in protest of the radical government restrictions. Danny has since been released with a series of tickets and violations. His attorney, Louis Gerolmino, joins us now with an update on what happens next. Lou, thanks so much.
Hey, Buck, thanks for having us.
So just for everyone watching, in case they don't know what initially happened here, we have a bar and restaurant, Max Public House on Staten Island. What happened with your clients? How did this whole circumstance come to be?
So what happened was the governor, in all his wisdom, decided to cut Staten Island in half and declare an orange zone on the south shore of Staten Island and a yellow zone on the north shore of Staten Island, where an orange zone restriction does not allow indoor dining, and gym and going to the gym, nor getting haircuts. Basically, he shut down the small businesses on the south shore of Staten Island while leaving the other half of Staten Island open.
Now, what did your client do in response to this, and what happened with the arrival of law enforcement?
Well, after complying with all the government restrictions to reopen his business by spending money to socially distance his bar, put a new filter in, open outside dining, separate the tables, after spending all that money and finally reopening after being shut down for 6 months and then being re-shut down because of this orange zone restriction. And my client just had enough, and he is fighting back and remaining open no matter what happens.
How many sheriffs from New York went in for the initial, what we call it, a raid, a citation incident, whatever they want to say? How many were there?
I happened to be driving by the place on my way to my son's basketball workout, and I walked in just to speak to Danny and Keith, the two owners. And I was there for literally 30 seconds when 20 sheriff's deputies, not NYPD, Buck, sheriff's deputies, barged in the place, threw the 4 patrons out, and locked the door and kept the employees, Danny Presti, who was one of the general manager and a part owner, and myself locked into place for an hour and 15 minutes. And at the end of it, they took Danny in handcuffs and they issued me, as his attorney, 4 criminal court summonses, 4 criminal court charges that I now have to answer to for doing absolutely nothing. When they barged in, I turned to Danny, I turned to the sheriffs, and I said, we're going to be nothing but cooperative and polite. Do what you have to do. And we were the whole entire time. Danny got arrested for obstructing government administration, and he did nothing but act in a polite, respectful manner to those officers, even though 2 or 3 of them were very, very rude and aggressive.
Now, this is not something that has gone unnoticed. I know that it's been on national news. People have been talking about this all week, and there was a rally earlier in the week in Staten Island with hundreds of patriots. We have some video of it. Let's play it, and then I'll have you react.
This is a battle, people. I've been warning you, and finally you're out here. You business owners, I see your faces. How f***ing fed up you are. Yeah! You can go to Home Goods and buy a porcelain bunny for your f***ing mantle, but these guys can't sell a damn hamburger and a beer.
Is there a legal case that either you or some of these other business owners and individuals may try to bring against New York State for exactly the capricious and arbitrary nature of some of these regulations that separate out a business that can operate in one area but not in another, even if they're only blocks, even yards apart?
Absolutely ridiculous, Buck. We've already brought the lawsuits. My partners and I, Mark Fonte and James Mamingus, we were at the forefront of this for the last 9 months. We're representing all the restaurant owners, all the business owners on Staten Island pro bono. We haven't charged them a dime. We brought 4 lawsuits already. We will bring another lawsuit next week. And I just want to say, Buck, there were over 2,000 people there on that rally. 2,000 Staten Islanders. I've been living in Staten Island my whole life. I've never been more proud to call myself a Staten Islander. My friends and neighbors and small business owners were out there rallying in a peaceful, respectful manner. There might have been some curse words said, but nothing violent. We did not riot. We did not loot our neighbor's property. We protested in a peaceful manner. And I have to say, people actually stayed and cleaned up after the protest. This is how you're supposed to protest in America, Buck, and I was proud to be a part of it.
Lou, before we let you get back to what you're doing here representing everybody, I just want to ask you what redress you want, both for your client and also for these lawsuits. What would you like to see if the courts rule in your favor? What would that mean for Staten Island, and I assume then for New York City?
You know, sadly, I don't think the courts in New York State are going to rule against Mayor de Blasio or Governor Cuomo. I'm glad you asked that question. I would just, Buck, to be a leader, you have to care about your people, right? That's the first rule of leadership. Whether you're in the Army, whether you're in a sports team, whether you're a corporation, the person leading has to care about his people. We urge Governor Cuomo, these are your constituents. These are the people you were elected to lead. You have to care about them. We understand he has a very difficult job to do. We understand that the COVID virus is here and it's affecting people. But we just urge him to consider another way. Consider what these business owners are going through. Stop being sarcastic and rude and just pandering to the people that are rioting and looting. Show true leadership, and true leadership is showing that you care about your people.
Lou, good luck to you and to your clients. Please give them my best, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for your support, Buck. We really appreciate it.
Economic uncertainty has left us all wondering about the future. Stock market seems to blow back and forth like the winds of political change. So what do we do to protect ourselves and our income for the future? For over a decade now, simple and conservative real estate investing has been the retirement answer for thousands of done-for-you real estate clients. It's now part of my answer to retirement. I'm not just a believer in what done-for-you real estate does, I'm also a client. I recently closed on my first ever investment property, all through my friends at Done4You Real Estate. Their system flat out works. Done4You Real Estate found me an amazing property, got me the financing, got it all fixed up, and are now renting it out and managing it for me. They're an award-winning, groundbreaking company with 13 years of experience that allows everyday, hardworking Americans to finally own investment real estate without all the risk and difficulty of doing it on your own. Visit doneforyoubuck.com to learn more and find out if you qualify to take advantage of what may be a once-in-a-generation opportunity to finally own your own investment real estate. Remember when the pandemic first started to spread across the country, and the only thing we kept hearing from health experts and state leaders was 15 days to slow the spread? Well, folks, we're now on day 263 of Slow the Spread. During these past 8 months, more than 270,000 Americans have died from the virus, and millions have lost their jobs or helplessly watched their livelihoods crumble to the ground. Small business in America has been decimated. What we've seen happen to the backbone of this nation goes against everything it was founded on: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And for what? Let's take a look at some of the devastating numbers from these mandates and lockdowns. Since March, more than 160,000 businesses nationwide have closed their doors, with more than half of those closed for good. The restaurant and retail industries have been hit the hardest. 61% of restaurants and 58% of shops have permanently closed their doors. Let that sink in. And remember, those aren't the Walmarts and Targets and Amazons. Those are the mom and pop shops in your towns that were forced to board up their storefronts because of government mandates. Democratic leaders have let a virus drive the American economy in the wrong direction. We're now in the midst of a disgraceful government overreach that has no end in sight. When do we say enough is enough? Joining me now is someone who understands the pain that small businesses have been feeling. Founder and CEO of Black Rifle Coffee, Evan Hafer. Evan, good to see you.
Great to see you, Buck. Thanks for having me on.
How are you and your fellow veterans that have founded businesses managing, whether it's a startup or just small businesses across the board? What's it been like during this year of the pandemic, trying to stay afloat and stay in business?
It's difficult. I think that there's been a lot of shifts in the economy and people's purchasing behaviors. A lot of that has been driven to e-com or direct-to-consumer. So, there's been some companies, for instance, ours, we've been able to grow. So I've been able to hire a lot more veterans this year. I know for my peer group that They own different types of businesses that aren't necessarily easy to transport over to a direct-to-consumer type of business. They've been hit really hard. It's paid a substantial toll on the entire veteran entrepreneur subculture, and I think it's one of those things that we continue to talk as peers, how we can navigate through this, help one another as far as how do we offset some resources, shared services and things like that in order to push through this and keep some of these guys afloat. That's been a daily, if not weekly, topic of mine. I literally just finished a podcast talking about this exact same thing.
Evan, given the realities of COVID as we face them right now heading into the winter, it looks like there's a trend that's going to get worse that's particularly concerning, not just businesses that have shut down on a temporary basis, but permanent closures. This is a chart that shows the number of national businesses marked closed on Yelp since March 1st, and the trend is going only in one direction. It's just going up and up over time. What do you think should be done? I mean, is there more that the government, just in general terms, you don't have to get into the which government, right, whether state, local, federal, but is there more the government should be doing across the board to try to help? Or is it just a question of they got to let these stores open up and everything else is going to be insufficient?
I think the number one thing that people can do right now, specifically our political leadership, whether that's local, state, federal representatives, they can open the dialogue as far as how do we solve this problem. For instance, as we start to look at small and medium-sized businesses and how they're affected, and obviously they're closing, what we have to do is we have to, one, identify the problem, right? It's much like curing any type of illness. We have to recognize something's wrong. And then we have to continue to look for answers as to how do we inject our economies with the proper type of funding. Or there was the Triple P initiative earlier in the year. I know that helped a lot of small, medium-sized businesses. It also helped a lot of other businesses. There are things that we can rush and there are things that we can be more strategic. We can plan out. We can look at different aspects of small businesses and how this is affecting them. And then how do we apply the appropriate funding in order to create the greatest amount of impact? I know that America, our fiber as a society, it changes completely if we start to eliminate and eviscerate small and medium-sized businesses within our communities. Some of these places are the fiber and continuity of how we interact as people. So as we start to look at how this is affecting not only the economy, but local individual psychology, this is absolutely devastating for business.
Also, we can show that the carnage, unfortunately, from an economic perspective, spreads far and wide here. Where are the most U.S. businesses closed? It's Los Angeles, it's New York, San Francisco, Chicago, and a lot of those temporary closures are now switching. I mean, the trend is moving toward permanent because they could, and I'm sure as somebody who has to look at a profit and loss statement and make decisions about personnel and purchasing and hiring, Evan, that you can survive as a business for a few months, perhaps under a lockdown. But now it looks like this second wave, if we go into these extreme and somewhat arbitrary closures, could finish off a lot of these businesses that have just been struggling up to this point.
There's literally no doubt. And I think the long tail effects in the economy as we start to look at permanent closures to businesses, how does that affect the real estate market? How does that affect the other tertiary businesses that quite possibly we aren't looking at today, but what does that look like 6 months, a year, 18, 24 months out? As we start to consolidate business, because that's ultimately what's happening, is you have two main retailers that are consolidating the majority of our consumer behaviors. How is that affecting the way that we purchase, interact? How is it affecting our individual municipalities and property values? This is a very prominent problem that we have to look at as Americans just in general, not only how the COVID is affecting us as individuals, as a lockdown, how is this going to affect the long-term stability of our economy and the long-term initiative to evolve businesses from entrepreneurs? That's the big thing, because this will de-incentivize entrepreneurship in general. We could be looking at inflation, closures as far as our property values are concerned. When we look at a housing bubble at the same time as a commercial property bubble. These are big issues that we have to address now and get ahead of while we still have time to look at and try to fix these things.
Evan, some of this is pretty grim prognosis, so we wanted to try to take an opportunity here, and it's just the reality, as you and I both know, what we're facing with this economy. But let's take a moment here to give everybody a little bit of uplift. We always appreciate your continued partnership with the show, and as a veteran yourself and a company that employs a lot of veterans, wanted to give you a chance to tell us about Black Rifle's Buy a Bag, Give a Bag campaign and what it does for troops overseas.
Well, this is a veteran business. So it's a veteran-owned and operated business. I started this company in my garage, roasting 1 pound at a time. We're up to above 400 employees. We've got above a 50% veteran hiring rate. This year, we're going to have the ability to give back over I'm hoping to get to $1 million in give back as far as veteran initiatives, so nonprofit initiatives. But something that we do every year, I'm very passionate about, is what we do is we do a Buy a Bag, Give a Bag campaign. So every time you buy a bag from Black Rifle Coffee at blackriflecoffee.com, we automatically calculate those numbers. We load up pallets and we ship them overseas for troops that are still deployed in harm's way during the holiday season. It's a big initiative. I love doing it. It's one of the things that really uplifted my spirits when I was deployed, if I had fresh coffee. So it's just one of the little things that we can do to ease the burden of deployments for soldiers, sailors, and Marines.
Evan Hafer, everybody. Veteran, CEO, entrepreneur. Great to see you, my friend. Thanks for all you do. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Buck.
It's almost time for our daily roundup of liberal lunacy from all around the interwebs. The Buckshot is next. The worst mayor in America set some terrible rules for the holidays. Former FBI Director James Comey gets a new cushy gig, and CNN strikes back, or tries to, against James O'Keefe. We've got it all in The Buckshot. Not only do I think Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York City, is the worst mayor in the country, I think he has a special skill. It's almost a superpower. He can ruin anything. I mean, think of something, put Bill de Blasio in charge of it, or have him talk about an issue, and he'll make it awful. He'll ruin it for you. Even going to see the very large tree at Rockefeller Center, de Blasio has managed to make that an awful experience. If you listen to him, here you go.
Tune in on Wednesday to see the tree lit. Now, that's the best way to do it. I know some people are going to still want to go in person. I'm going to tell you up front, please, if you can make the decision to watch it on TV, that's so much better. But if you choose to go in person, there's going to be a lot of specific rules in place to make it much safer than normally would be the case in a typical year. There will be a reservation system. Groups of no more than 4 people at a time will be able to go up and view the tree. It's a timed, socially distanced approach.
I mean, they're outside. You got to make reservations, groups of 4. What? Is there anything that he can make not fun? Is there anything that he can't somehow make kind of awful? No, I think the answer to that is no. But yeah, that's right. You could also just go outdoors and just see the tree from I live in Midtown Manhattan. Let me tell you, just walk. There's the tree. You can see it. Don't go through the reservation system. It's so crazy. So one of the things that I always tell conservatives, one of the reasons why I think we have such trouble battling the left is that they do something much better than we do. And that is they take care of their soldiers. Not the troops, not our military. No, that's what we do. No, I'm talking about their ideological warriors, the people that are willing to either leak classified information or violate the ethics of their business or their position, especially from within the federal bureaucracy. They take care of their people. Perfect example of this, James Comey. He's a guy that you would think would be hanging his head in shame, right? Part of the Russia collusion hoax, leaked information to the New York Times through an intermediary to get an investigation started of the sitting president as payback because Comey's giant ego, almost as large as Comey is tall, demanded it, right? So we have all these problems. And yet James Comey, who was ignominiously fired from the FBI, has just landed a great gig. he's going to be, according to the New York Post, teaching at Columbia University. I wonder if he's going to be teaching Deep State 101 or perhaps how to plan a soft coup in 10 days. Something like that. James Comey, among the very worst of the deep state folks, and he's gotten a huge book deal. He goes on speaking tour across the country. That's right, 7-figure book deal, 6-figure speaking engagements, teaching gig at a prestigious law school. That's what happens when you do the left's bidding. Everybody sees this and they'll take note. They'll say, wow, I can be a hero and make a whole lot of money, or I can stand up for what's right and be a conservative Republican. And then when things go badly for me, because the left will attack you, of course, if you do that, people will say, well, sorry, I don't want to take a risk here. We were at a think tank. We don't want people to say mean things or boycott us, or, this company doesn't want the problems of the social justice wars coming after us. That's what ends up happening. On the right, you're on your own. You get canceled on the right, you're on your own. On the left, why'd you get canceled? You're being a good little assassin for left-wing purposes, going after targets that they want you to, taking people's characters out. Yeah, guess what? Then they'll make sure that you have a nice, cushy, soft landing, probably better than you ever had before, as you see with James Comey. CNN. Oh, we could just do a segment every day on how CNN is the worst. But CNN, through their PR team, who I've had some interactions with myself in the past, they threw out a legal threat against James O'Keefe, because you'll recall we talked about this in the show yesterday that James O'Keefe had recorded the conference call that CNN does in the morning, and Jeff Zucker is a part of it. So they say to James O'Keefe, this may be illegal. That's right, running to the police. That's what CNN's doing. Oh gosh, let's try to get James O'Keefe in criminal jeopardy for recording their private meetings, but they're going to have some problems with that. One, I'd be willing to bet that they were recording it too. So if they're recording it, then the wiretapping laws, you would assume, if James O'Keefe has a legitimate access code, which he clearly did, isn't really a consideration. But I think CNN's going to have to let this one go. But we'll see. Jeff Zucker, he runs that place like it's his own little toy box, and he does whatever he wants. So we'll see if he actually ends up pushing criminal charges there. What's the downside of monarchy? There are a lot of things you're probably thinking. What are the bad parts of monarchy? You got one person who's in charge, no oversight, endless power, right? But also, how do you become a monarch? Well, you're just born. And guess what? Especially if you look at the history of European royal families and the possible narrowing of the gene pool, there have been some bad outcomes for European monarchs in the past. Prince Harry is out there saying the following. Somebody said to me at the beginning of the pandemic, it's almost as though Mother Nature has sent us to our rooms for bad behavior. To really take a moment and think about what we've done. That's what he told the network's CEO and head of strategy. Mother Nature, this is what we get for messing with Mother Nature. Of all the stupid things said about the pandemic, feels like this may be the dumbest. So in a sense, impressive. That's it for Hold the Line, everybody. The No Spin News with Bill O'Reilly is up next. Have a great night. Shields high.